to listening and communications. It's human nature to want and need communication with others. However, not all communication is the same. There are multiple ways to communicate, though not all equally utilized. From the following chart, you can see that in our daily communication, we spend 32% mass listening, which is listening to a small or large group of people, 17% reading, whether it's email, newspaper, or documentation, 16% speaking, which can be face-to-face, over the phone, or even webcam, 14% writing or typing, just as a part of everyday work life, whether on a computer or a mobile device, and 21% actually face-to-face listening, where you're in direct proximity and communication with another individual. All in all, we can see that over 50% of our communication consists of actually listening as opposed to speaking. So, what can you expect? In a brief overview, we will be covering an introduction to listening and communication, the art of attentive listening, objective or otherwise positive listening, participative listening, and lastly, listening under pressure. But don't worry, it's all very simple. Before we go further, we're going to take a self-assessment of how well we listen by rating our listening skills with a series of simple-to-answer questions that will be tallied at the end. Remember, hearing becomes listening only when you pay attention to what is said and follow it very closely. Using the scale provided, rate yourself on the following behaviors. Question 1. Even though the subject may bore me, I pay attention almost always, most of the time, some of the time, or almost never. Question number 2. I stop myself from finishing other people's sentences almost always, most of the time, some of the time, or almost never. Question number 3. Before evaluating what someone says, I wait for them to finish. Almost always, most of the time, some of the time, or almost never. Question number 4. I have continuous eye contact, almost always, most of the time, some of the time, or almost never. Question number 5. I listen to understand instead of waiting to talk. Almost always, most of the time, some of the time, or almost never. Question number 6. I nod, smile, and lean forward to show that I am listening. Almost always, most of the time, some of the time, or almost never. Question number 7. I say, uh-huh, mm-hmm, and oh, to show signs I am listening. Almost always, most of the time, some of the time, or almost never. Question number 8. I don't interrupt people that are speaking to me, almost always, most of the time, some of the time, or almost never. Question number 9. I try to eliminate distractions, almost always, most of the time, some of the time, or almost never. Question number 10. I only ask questions if I don't understand something. Almost always, most of the time, some of the time, or almost never. Question number 11. I don't tear other people's ideas down just because I don't agree with it. Almost always, most of the time, some of the time, or almost never. Question number 12. To verify I understood what was said, I will paraphrase. Almost always, most of the time, some of the time, or almost never. Question 13. I actively work to be a better listener. Almost always, most of the time, some of the time, or almost never. Question number 14. I always make sure that I listen so I understand what is being said. Almost always, most of the time, some of the time, or almost never. And lastly, question number 15. I'm always in control emotionally, no matter what is said. Almost always, most of the time, some of the time, or almost never. Now it's time to tally your score. If you made between 50 and 60, congratulations! You're an excellent listener. If you made between 40 and 49, good job. You are a very good listener, and you still have room for improvement. If you made between 30 and 39, you might want to keep working at it. Good listening skills are challenging to come by, but not impossible. And if you made between 15 and 29, well, then seriously, come on. You can do better than that. Many adults are terrible listeners. Here are some signs that you can watch for. You interrupt people before they finish their sentences. You start thinking about what you want to say while the other person is still talking. You can hardly wait to comment or add your perspective to the conversation. You're just waiting for your turn to speak. You rarely ask questions in a conversation and often answer questions. You are chiefly concerned about getting your own view across. You try to one-up everyone. In other words, you say, if you think that is something, I was once, and fill in the blank. You forget someone's name 5 seconds after you were introduced. You just listen for the facts, and everything else is too tedious. You love to hear yourself talk. You begin 50% of your sentences with, I feel, or in my opinion, or what's even worse, yes, but, ... The battle of improving your listening skills is divided in half. On one hand, improving your listening skills requires having the courage to recognize that you do have room for improvement, while the other hand requires constant practice. With courage and practice, anyone can become an effective listener. Listening is not just about understanding the facts. Listening is about reading body language. It's about opening your mind to someone else's ideas. It's about understanding and appreciating someone else's concept of reality. The concept of hearing versus listening can be broken down very simply by understanding that hearing is a passive, organic action that requires little response or acknowledgement. Some may say validation of the person speaking, whereas listening is very active and a skill or behavior that can be improved upon. When talking about hearing versus listening, there are 9 keys to effective listening. Find areas of interest. Judge the content, not on the delivery itself. Hold your comments. Listen for ideas. Be flexible. Concentrate on listening. Resist distraction. Keep your mind open. And lastly, capitalize on thought speed. We think a lot faster than we speak. The question is, how would a good listener respond as compared to a bad listener? Let's see if you can tell the difference. In finding areas of common interest, one asks, what's in it for me? While the other tunes out dry subjects altogether. When judging content, not the delivery, one judges strictly the content, skipping over delivery errors completely, while the other tunes out completely if the delivery is poor. When holding comments, one doesn't judge till all the information has been gathered, whereas the other tends to enter into arguments very easily regardless of information gathered. When listening for ideas, one listens for central themes to tie everything together, while the other listens simply for the facts and nothing else. When it comes to flexibility, one keeps an open mind to all possibilities and ideas, while the other takes intensive notes to compare their own ideas. When it comes to concentrating on actually listening, one exhibits positive body language while maintaining eye contact, while the other shows no energy or interest whatsoever, and their attention is usually fake. In resisting distractions, one avoids them altogether and stays completely focused, while the other is very easily distracted by the tiniest thing. When it comes to keeping an open mind, one interprets hot topics and sensitive information for deeper meanings, while the other tends to react to emotional words and hot topics. And lastly, when capitalizing on thought speed, where we think faster than we speak, one challenges, anticipates, mentally summarizes, weighs the evidence, listens for hidden messages or agendas, while the other tends to daydream when listening to slow speakers. When we look at these characteristics, if you chose the left column, congratulations! However, if you chose the right column, well, better luck next time. Although English is considered the language of global business, there are very many dialects not only from those of diverse countries, but also within the US itself. So it's only natural that at some point you'll hear what may sound like a foreign accent. So, how should you respond? Well, first, don't pretend to understand. It's okay to gently explain that you're having a little difficulty understanding them. It's okay to simply and gently say, I apologize, I'm having a little difficulty understanding you. If you could slow down just a little bit, I'll be able to get it all correct for you. That's the most important thing to the person with the accent, knowing you want to help and get it right. This phrase apologizes, acknowledges, empathizes, and creates credibility. It shows that you want to help. 2. Don't rush. Rushing threatens callers. Slow down. If you find yourself constantly saying, over and over in rapid succession, you're probably rushing the customer. 3. Don't shout. They are not hard of hearing. Try to keep letting them know, I'm here to help. 4. Don't be rude. We don't mean to be rude, however, saying, hey, I can't understand you, can give the wrong impression. Again, go back to number 1 and explain that you're having difficulty understanding. And lastly, do keep a job aid available. Keep a few simple phrases in that language near to you. Short phrases that would let the customer know you're at least trying to make an effort. Always remember, whether talking in person or over the phone, smile. It's a universal phrase all its own. Deborah Fine is most notably quoted for saying, don't jeopardize a relationship by failing to listen. Your job as a conversational partner is to listen when the other person is speaking. This isn't optional. It's required courtesy when conversing. So in essence, listen to others as you would want them to listen to you. Next we come to objective or positive listening. When speaking to someone, it's very important to choose your words carefully, because what you say can give the person listening the wrong impression. Due to this, you want to avoid using wimpy words. Let's take a look at these 2 sentences. Which of these do you find to be more effective? The difference in wording is fairly subtle. However, the influence communicated to your customers or even people in general can be profound. Sentence 2 is confident and strong. This is a statement from someone who obviously believes in what they are saying. Wimpy words make you appear less confident. Always try to use words that convey understanding and assuredness in what you are talking about. This all is part of not only determining your customer's needs, but also cross-selling. But how do we improve the skill? We can't find a solution if we don't first determine that there is a problem. And that problem is becoming a better listener. The decision can only be made by you. Remember that once the decision has been made, it becomes a lot easier to then welcome the caller. Make it personal, address them by their name, and allow them to address you by yours. Be obviously friendly when you welcome the caller. Answer the caller's request by saying, you have called the right place. Next, concentrate. Give the caller your undivided attention. Avoid distractions. Do one thing at a time. Focus on what the caller is saying. This gives you an opportunity to cross-sell. We need to really listen to our customers in order to offer them additional services. Available resources such as JHA Today, corporate information, sales and contact lists, print-off maps can be used to help customers. CLS also offers seminars on specific products that can expand their knowledge in customer service. The reason this is so important is because by cross-selling, you can prevent the loss of a potential $144,510 per customer you speak to. It's also important to keep an open mind. Don't interrupt. Let callers finish what they started to say. It's hard to provide a solution until you know the whole problem. Stick to the facts and avoid assumptions. Remain objective and don't jump to conclusions and make solutions your goal. Make sure you have done all you can before the call is concluded. Also, give feedback. This shows the caller that you are in fact listening actively. The caller can hear this by the verbal feedback you give them. Use a variety of verbal cues to avoid sounding bored or mechanical. In order to give the best feedback, you must be an active listener. This includes nonverbal contact, which is best suited for face-to-face feedback since it uses head nods, eye contacts, posture, and body language to show interest in what is being said. Verbal attends, which are responses such as yes, I see, uh-huh, and I understand, are examples of verbal responses used in giving feedback. There are also door opener questions that typically begin with who, what, when, where, and how. Restating is a great way of connecting with your customer. Restating allows you to demonstrate understanding and empathy. Understanding occurs when the customer confirms your statement is correct. If your statement is incorrect, the customer will correct you by clarifying what they originally said. This step is the test of your listening ability. And finally, although listening is important, it can be difficult to retain all the information you require during your conversation. So, take notes! Always have paper and a pen or pencil handy and close by every phone. Use a system of abbreviations or shorthand to make note-taking easier and more effective. Take time to write down what someone says is the biggest compliment you can give. And on a final note, it's always smart to repeat or rephrase the message back to the caller, reaffirming to the customer once again that you were in fact actively listening. Participative listening is crucial when it comes to customer service. This is where you not only have to rely on your listening skill, but also your verbal communication. Customer service is one aspect of business where communication is crucial. Customers can build an entire overall impression of a company and their value of customers solely based on the quality of service they receive. Good customer service is people management. It's acting as a mediator to help all parties involved find a mutually beneficial and agreeable resolution. In other words, good service comes in successfully managing the people you speak to. Also, keep in mind that your own behavior is the only tool that you have to turn a negative situation into a positive one. If the customer is angry or hostile, and we do not know how to deal with them, our first reaction is to become angry and hostile as well, mirroring their behavior. Don't argue with them. Don't take bad behavior personally. Step back, take a deep breath, restate what the customer has just communicated to you. It shows the customer that you listened to what they said instead of devising a defense. You must try to influence the customer positively. Look for the good things that can be capitalized on in the conversation that will redirect the customer from the anger they have and help them to view the situation more objectively. This will bring the discussion into a scenario driven more by facts than emotion. If you can achieve this, usually the result will be one of goodwill and trust between you and that customer. We as customer service providers must try to meet the customer needs. It is important for you to know what the customer wants, needs, thinks, and feels. You need to know if they are satisfied and if they will return to us in the future. It is important for you to identify their basic needs. By understanding their needs, know their timing restraints, anticipate their needs, be able to read them whether through vocal intonation or body language. Enhance your listening skills, and get feedback from the customer. We must also strive to satisfy their emotional needs by understanding the customer, make them feel welcome, provide recognition, deal with stress so you are able to support and educate our customers, make them feel important, and make them feel comfortable. Another aspect of participative listening is recognizing the verbal and nonverbal forms. An example of verbal communication would be if I were to clench my jaw, flatten my expression, and say, "Nothing is wrong." Even with verbal communication, body language can express your true feelings, thereby overriding what you're actually saying through your tone and attitude. Nonverbal communication is not only body language, such as the rolling of the eyes, but is also written word. Therefore, it's important to be careful about how you express yourself in things such as email. If you sound happy in your email, show that you're happy also. Otherwise, when your verbal does not match your nonverbal, research studies have shown that they believe the nonverbal more. In other words, your actions will speak louder than your words. Next, we have communication in person versus over the phone. When speaking to someone in person, you must not only listen to what they are saying, but how they say it, even down to their facial expression, the tone, and attitude. Use your powers of observation to notice the subtle shifts in their mood and assessment of the situation. And likewise, you must listen with your face. That's right, listen with your face. This goes back to what we covered earlier when we talked about showing our interest in what the person has to say, based on how interested or engaged we look. It's very easy to see the difference between speaking with someone over the phone as opposed to in person. One is reliant not only on auditory and visual content, but the other is supported entirely by audio and textual content. Sadly, though, not everything can run as smoothly as we'd like it to. There are also barriers to effective communication. Some barriers can be attributed to the ratio of thought versus speed. Emotions, language barriers, obviously, noise and verbal clutter, the act of pretending to listen, interruptions, technological issues, stereotypes, trigger or red flag words and phrases, attitude and tone, presentation skills, and nonverbal actions or body language. In becoming a better listener, creating an acronym of your name can be a helpful mnemonic device that will help you remember simple yet important practices to becoming a better participative listener. For this example, we'll use the name Jack H. So, by looking at this, we can remember that jumping to conclusions is never good. Actions speak louder than words. Choose to focus on what you hear. Keep your mouth closed and ears open. Hearing is easy. Listening is challenging. Now, try using your name to make your own mnemonic device. Everyone has those busy moments during the day when they have to multitask just to keep up, let alone listen under all that pressure. When we get overwhelmed with so many things, always put it into perspective and ask yourself, what am I here for? Don't get so wrapped up in what you are doing you forget your purpose in being there in the first place, which is to help. Another aspect of listening under pressure is genuinely listening. We may do this with friends and family, but it's also very important to keep the same habit around coworkers and customers. Don't just go through the motions. Really listen for a change and let people know through your action that you do indeed care. Not everyone hears the same way, but they do see your actions. Next, how to avoid emotional leakage. First, what is emotional leakage? Simply put, it's a transferal of negative feelings from one situation to the next. Remember, transferal of frustration is unfair to the next innocent customer who has no idea of what you may be going through, and can cost your organization plenty in lost business and wasted goodwill. We all have difficult days, but unless we can keep our emotions in check, it can make an already difficult day even worse. To avoid this transferal, try pausing for a second or two before taking the next call or conversation to gather your thoughts and allow yourself to close the book on the previous conversation and wipe the slate clean. Take a deep breath. Shift gears emotionally. Regain your professional composure. And remember, smile. Smile before picking up the phone. Remember, people can hear you smile, even when they can't see it. Also, a phony smile is better than a real frown. Wear your smile, even when you don't feel like it. A man by the name of Mark Madison once wrote, "Smile and the feelings will follow." If you smile long enough, you will come up with a reason. The power of self-talk. Just for a moment, think of one of your customers who is usually difficult to deal with. What would you most likely say to yourself when you encounter this customer? Is it nice, derogatory, somewhat judgmental, critical, or is it positive and encouraging? One way to prepare yourself so that you don't inadvertently slip and say what you really think is to rehearse a simple set of responses. Listen closely to what you say to yourself. Self-talk affects your delivery of service and the way you respond. Learn to love turning difficult customers around. Change your self-talk to change your attitude. Positive thinking doesn't always work, but negative thinking always does. It's not what you say, but what you heard. It's not what you show, but what is seen. It's not what you mean, but what is understood. Perception is reality. And with that, I say, congratulations on completing your training. And remember, one of the most sincere forms of respect you can show is to actually listen to what another person has to say.